Okay, welcome back. I'm so excited for the topic of this pajama chat. And it's actually pretty appropriate because we're filming this on a Saturday morning, and from the bottom down, I'm completely pajamaed. We are talking about love in quarantine times, and we joke around with Jess all the time. We always say we want to wife her up, and she's a Bumble rep. And I'm so intrigued about what dating is going to look like, what it's like being single. And for the first time, I'm actually going to kind of let Jess drive this one because she's the expert on this. I know nothing about anything in the dating scene these days. So she's going to take it from here, and she's going to introduce our guest, and we're going to roll right into it. I'm so psyched.
All right. Thanks, Kim. Well, I'm super excited because we have an awesome guest today, James M. Sama. Did I say it right?
Right. You did, actually, yes. Very impressive.
Everyone messes mine up, so I always got to check with people.
That's great. Great.
James is a nationally recognized speaker, presenter, coach on human performance, relationships, leadership, author of Unlocking Love, fellow Suffolk alum, and so much more. He does a little bit of everything. So that's kind of what I want to kick it off with, because you do so much. We were talking about it before we officially started this, that a lot of people come to you for maybe one thing and then realize, actually, I need something else from you and help in this area of my life. So how did you get into this field? And I guess what's a typical day like? Because that's what I'm curious about.
Oh my God. Recently the days have just been, nonstop with calls and like virtual workshops and video chats with clients and things like that. But this all really stemmed from like my own, and we were talking before the call about our own kind of personal journeys and frustrations. It all really stemmed from that. Whereas I grew up in a very traditional, like Italian household, kind of old school family. So my view of relationships growing up was almost like the 50s sitcom, and it was like, that's just kind of what I thought was normal. And when I started attempting to date at high school age, I learned really quickly that just did not work. And I'm like, why am I not getting like good responses from love letters and roses and all this stuff that I thought was legit? And it kind of, as I grew further into adulthood and saw that not only was this stuff not really working or not really prominent, but nobody was happy. So I started being like, hey, like when people were putting effort in these ways, relationships seem to have lasted more. And now they're not doing that anymore. And also, relationships aren't lasting, so maybe there's a connection. So I just started writing about it, and I was like, here's how we can be better. Like from the male perspective, initially I wanted to be like, hey guys, like we can step up. Here's how we can be better as men, as gentlemen. And I just had started a blog that I didn't really know anything about. I was at the time, blogging was big. And within 3 months that I started writing, I had one article about like being a real gentleman in a relationship that ended up being read over 1.5 million times in one day.
Wow.
Like literally I had no idea what was happening. I was like, what is going on here with this article? And it really just spiraled. And, I started getting calls from radio stations, from TV stations. And essentially I was like, I need to figure out, I can't be a one-hit wonder, right? Like I need to figure out why this is happening and how I can build off of it. And I saw how frustrated people were with relationships. So I really focused on that. No, that's okay. The dog has to chime in too.
That's scary. At first I thought it was like a baby crying, and I was like, oh my God.
Oh no, that's the sound my dog makes all the time.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. Well, they wanted to be involved, so. So I really just ran with it. I was like, clearly there's some real deep-rooted dissatisfaction here in the dating world, and I just kept writing about it. And now it's like 38 million people that have read the website, and it's it has become a real widespread topic.
Wow. And yeah. I'm sure kind of what brought us here to begin with was that we were thinking there's so much different now in every aspect of life with quarantine. I mean, we don't go to restaurants the same way we used to. You're not just out at a bar to meet people. How has that changed with what you're talking to people about now, and where do you see the future of dating going with that?
Well, I can tell you where I hope it goes. And I was hoping a lot of things were going to be changing, like different norms, like we would, and then, you kind of go out into the world, and half the time you're like, do people realize there's a global pandemic happening? You know what I mean? So is there going to be long-term change? I hope so in some ways, but it's very possible that in a few months we're just kind of back to normal because people are habitual creatures. But right now, I think that there actually are some benefits to it. And maybe you're seeing this with Bumble, and we can talk about all that. But like, you're not really in a position where people are basically like, hey, just come over and watch a movie for like the first time you meet them. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like you're sort of forced to have real conversations.
Right.
Because, if you escalate immediately to something that's like sexual or whatever, it's sort of like, what's the point of this? What do you know what I mean? It's clear where somebody's intentions are. So you kind of have this filtration system of, you might talk to somebody for a month or 2 months before you even meet them in person.
Right.
And that now is so much different than before, that like, if somebody only makes it a couple weeks or you get bored of them, whereas normally you would have already just met them.
Yeah.
Now, you've got this elongated process that can show you who you actually want to get to know on a deeper level or not.
Yeah.
So I think that, that kind of has sparked a different cycle of things.
Yeah, I totally agree, because I noticed that from the Bumble side, that now, especially at the beginning of the quarantine, where we thought it was only going to be a few weeks. So, I was just chatting with anyone. I was like, I'm going to weed out the people that, we don't have anything in common. There's, no future there. But it gave you a chance to like really get to know them before that first meeting. And then once you hang out or something, it's, okay, well, we actually know each other. It's not a super awkward first date, so to speak.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is a big piece of, what was missing before. And because there just wasn't that kind of that deeper conversation, that connection. You would just talk about random stuff or whatever. And another piece of this is it's, you have to look at how people are reacting to all of the quarantine stuff, all of the COVID things, right? Because it's reflective of, I think, worldview, values, and things like that. And if you start talking to somebody from a dating perspective and you haven't left your house in 3 months, and they've been out partying every single weekend, then you're like, it's an instant just kind of like, you know what? And no, I'm not trying to judge anybody. I mean, I do publicly normally, but on the show, I'm not going to do it. It's just a difference in worldview. You know what I mean? It's just, there's an incompatibility, I think, that is signaled there from the beginning, because you haven't just approached the world for a traumatic experience in the same way. So that is also, I think, a new kind of filtration system.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot happening right now that's kind of showing what kind of people, and what people care about. And you're able to be like, you know what, we don't see the same view on this topic that's really big right now. Sorry, not going to work out.
Yeah. No, 100%. And that's something that, it was kind of, there's so much happening right now that is in your face. I mean, whether it's the protests or the riots or Black Lives Matter or COVID or whatever, these things are just so prominent that it's almost as if you can't just have meaningless conversations about fluff.
Yeah.
And if you do, I think that is just another sign of, and depending on what you're, again, like, I'm not trying to make assumptions of people, but like, if you are the type of person who wants a serious connection, who wants to build something real with someone, and nothing anybody talks about is of substance, then you're like, hey, look at everything happening in the world right now, and you don't even want to comment on it. You don't have an opinion, right? It's kind of like that's another thing that I think is helping people see where they want to address or like put their time or not.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's probably a tough time for people who are not looking for anything more than a casual hookup right now, because that's probably not happening the same way. So.
Oh, definitely not. And that's like, and it's kind of, it really has sort of put the hookup culture like on hold.
Yeah.
And
I'm curious, do you guys think that's a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it's a good thing. I mean, personally, I'm 26 and, I go on dates, like I've been single for a while, and it's so weird because I feel like you just, at this point, almost have to assume that that's what everyone wants. So it's super kind of like this awkward, like tiptoeing around to be like, so are you looking to date or like what's going on? And yeah, I'm not a fan of that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think I do think it's a good thing. I mean, I went through a phase in my 20s where I would have been miserable right now because I was just all over the place, and I'm like, my God, I would have been like clawing at the walls. But now I do think that it's kind of this like reset in society where we're sort of forced to look at things differently. And there is that kind of like, I mean, 5 years ago, if you basically asked somebody if they've been tested recently, everybody knew what you meant. Right. Now it's like, oh, you mean for COVID?
Right.
Like it's a new, like, it's kind of a new set of circumstances that we're dealing with now that I think is going to become a longstanding norm. But again, like that, it's like I've started seeing somebody through the quarantine situation, like, and we talked for 2 months every day. And it was like, so when it came time to, actually get together, it was this conversation of, are we comfortable with this? But like we knew how each other had been handling the situation the entire time.
Yeah.
And it was, it was that level of comfort that was built where it's like, it's trust. And now it's like, you continue that, you get together, you have this reputation built with each other, and you understand that you're on the same page.
Mm.
But I think that's the way it has to be right now.
Right. Yeah, I felt that from what I've seen working with Bumble is that a lot of people, at the beginning maybe would start talking, but this has gone on so much longer than any of us expected. So some things I think have fizzled out just out of sheer like, oh, we don't know, are we comfortable getting together? And luckily things are starting to open, so I think people can kind of comfortably be like, well, maybe we can meet at this restaurant that's following all the rules and we feel safe here, this and that. But it is weird as far as like, if you're going to have your first date with someone going forward, what does that look like? Because it's not like you can just go grab a quick drink at a bar necessarily.
Right. Yeah.
It's going to be different for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I have a client who lives in Texas, and Texas is in rough shape right now, but like maybe a month or two ago, she went on a date with a guy and they went for a walk. Mm-hmm. Like they kind of met up and she was very adamant about, we have to keep our distance or whatever. And is it the most romantic thing in the world? No, but it's a way to move past, a video chat basically. And, see what somebody's like in person, how do they walk, how do they act, how do they talk or whatever. And build up to something where you feel more comfortable. But like, that's unfortunately, it really is, I think, just kind of Zoom drinks at this point. And now, like you said, Jess, like things are opening, so it's a little bit easier. But I think kind of setting those boundaries, it's a whole other thing. Like, what are we comfortable with? And it has to be a personal decision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I feel like as much as you can talk to someone for months and, you like them, you have to meet to still kind of get that, okay, there's a connection for sure here. So yeah, really tiptoeing around what everyone's comfortable with, being safe and all that.
Yeah. And I think that there's, and I had this happen recently, like in my own family, where it was basically like, hey, if we're going to agree to kind of like, do a holiday or do a get together and not wear masks and not be, like with your own family, which is just such a weird thing these days. It's like, take the next 2 weeks, don't go to like an event, don't go to a party, don't be around people or whatever, like a lot of people. And then, we're all at like kind of the 14-day kind of clear mark or whatever. And we're going to be more comfortable mixing and mingling, not like hugging and kissing and all that stuff, but like, not as on guard. So I think that, if you get to the point with somebody where maybe you've been talking for a few weeks and you're like, hey, listen, like I really want to get together, but like there has to be an inherent level of trust there where it's like, let's plan this for 2 weeks, and for the next 2 weeks, you and I both agree, like make sure that we're not in groups, we're not like around a big, a big amount of people or whatever, and then we know that we're as safe as we can be at the end of those 2 weeks when we actually get together.
Right.
Because I mean, it's either that or, and believe me, like, and as Kim may have seen I was like all over people during quarantine, like stop doing, like I was really, really, really strict. So I am not advocating for just like going out and doing whatever, but like either you completely sacrifice your entire life or you be as cautious and as careful as you can, trying to add different things in there that are important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And human connection is definitely one of those things, obviously. We all need that. It
is. And as far as before you get to that meeting point and you are talking for all these weeks indefinitely until, quarantine stuff is back to normal, what sort of questions should people be asking each other to really make the most of that time? Because usually you don't get this chunk of time to really get down to business, getting to know each other and like connecting like that. I feel like I'm always kind of awkward about like, okay, I'm just going to casually, so what do you like to do for fun? Or,
Yeah. Now it's like, I don't do anything for fun. That's what they do.
Exactly. Yeah. If you say what's up to someone, there is no answer. It's like same thing I've been doing for months.
Right.
So now you need to get to the deeper level, but I feel like people don't know how to do that a lot.
And that's an underlying issue. right? Like that's a part of, I think, our culture that has separated us so much, whether it's social media or whether it's just like different norms or whatever. Like the fact that we can't just talk about things, that's the whole separate problem, right? And that's not, I'm not being accusatory or blaming anybody for anything. I'm just saying, like, as a concept, to have to stop and be like, oh, well, if I haven't like done anything today, I don't have anything of meaning to talk about. That's and I think that if you start talking to somebody and that's the case for them, then it really kind of gives you this glimpse of maybe this person isn't somebody that I could build something really robust with, because they clearly don't have anything going on. So, I think that, and I know that sounds bad, but I mean, here we are. So, after all these years, I've kind of stopped like sugarcoating things, obviously. And but as far as questions and things like that, I've never been like the interview date type person. I think that it's an opportunity for us to all really, again, like I said, like there's so many different things that are in our face right now that we really have to start being honest with ourselves about, what our stance is on social issues, how, what our identity is, like what our purpose is. I talk about that stuff all the time, and being quarantined has made a lot of us have to reflect on that in ways that might be uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. So I think that the deeper that we can get into that with ourselves, that then we can bring that to conversations with other people, and express like our opinions and our thoughts, and have to be willing to do that. And it's like, hey, I feel this way about X, Y, and Z, or like, hey, did you see this thing on the news or whatever? I think the conversations have to just become more fluid like that. Mm-hmm. And as opposed to like, what do you like to do for fun? It's more like, I'm planning on doing such and such that gives your like moral stance, mm-hmm. whether you're liberal, conservative, whatever. And if the person's like, oh, me too, it's like, okay, good.
Right.
Or if they're like, what? Like, I can't believe you see this thing in that way, then at least off the bat that you get to those deeper issues quicker. You know what I mean?
That makes sense. Because, nothing serious is ever going to come if you keep it fluffy and light the entire time.
Right. Yeah.
So,
and I'm certainly not saying, like, dive into, like, the biggest social issues around, like, immediately. But I think it's those conversations kind of like, I mean, how have you been, like, how are you holding up? Like, how are you handling quarantine? Like, has work changed for you? Like, all the different things that are more about somebody's real life than just mm-hmm. kind of like, like you said, fluffy things, I think are more important.
Right.
Yeah,
I agree. I feel like I've seen in quarantine, I think people have kind of they're like, oh, whatever, I'll try any pickup line at this point. So a lot of people actually, from what I've seen, are jumping straight to that, like, mm-hmm. Hey, what are your thoughts on this, like, super deep issue? I'm like, I guess if you can do it, go for it right there. And if the person doesn't reply, it's not, clearly it's not a good mix.
Totally. And I don't think that's a bad idea. I mean, I think it really is kind of like, at this point, it's sort of like, let's just go for it, see what happens. You know? And there's
passionate about, right? Like if it's something you're super passionate about, you're better off kind of getting it, because right now you can't avoid those discussions. So if you're super passionate about something, you're right. You got to get that out of the way. Otherwise, I mean, look at family members are fighting, parents and kids are fighting. Like, do you really want to mate who you're going to end up fighting with as well over these things?
Yeah.
100%. And those are the things that I always say, like, I mean, that's what we need to work on as individuals anyway, is figuring out like that passion, that purpose, that direction. And it's like, and that's why I mentioned earlier with so many clients that want the dating advice and then, turns into, oh, I need to work on myself, because people haven't actually done that work. Mm-hmm. It's like one of the speaker bureaus that I speak off, like, within, is there's groups of CEOs and executives. And like some of these people are running major companies, like 10-figure companies. And you sit down with them in these roundtable discussions and you start talking about identity and like, who are you outside of your career? Mm-hmm. And they're all like, and it's the strangest thing to observe, because you see all these people and you're like, oh, these people have everything figured out, and they don't. So from like the dating perspective, and just from getting out into the world, I mean, developing those passions and figuring that out is the best way to then just therefore attract people that share it, because you're whether, even if you're not out doing things right now, maybe you're posting about it online, or maybe you're kind of like joining different virtual groups that you kind of chat with people with, and you make connections that way. Mm-hmm. And expressing that on your profiles, and kind of having like, obviously if you see somebody, in a Black Lives Matter shirt on their Bumble profile, and you are not of the same political affiliation, not that it's political, but
Right.
then obviously it's putting it out there in the beginning what you stand for.
Mhm.
And I think that there's value in that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another question I was going to ask, because I have very strong opinions about what makes a decent profile versus a really bad one, because I see bad ones all the time. And one of our jobs when we do events is like people can come ask us to kind of revamp their profile, or at least give them some tips. So I was curious. I think something like that is a great idea, is if there's something you're super passionate about, feature it on there. I wasn't sure if you had any specific things you've either seen or think that should be on any profile. Because, yeah, some people just, I don't know. Sometimes it just doesn't stand out, and that's not going to do any good.
No, I agree. And I think as far as the photos go, like obviously, and it really depends on, I think, who we're talking to, right? Because men are so visual that, not that women aren't, but like men are just, they should be reading bios, but I think we all know that there's pretty quick swiping happening. So, I think it really is that like projecting of, I think especially these days, it's less about like let me make sure I look good in every photo, as opposed to let me make sure that I'm projecting who I am in every photo.
Right.
Right. So I think that there's a really good kind of like, balance to be had of, am I, whether you're around family or whether you're wearing a mask. Some people don't, some people consider that a political statement. So it's like maybe in your third or fourth photo, like you've got a mask on or something. Like having that kind of, projection of this is me on a deeper level, I think now more than ever is important. As far as like the bio goes, I have to give credit to a guy named Brian Howie, who I've done a lot of events with. He hosts a lot of events across the country, and his idea is there should be like 3 things in your bio about you, 2 things about what you're looking for, and 1 thing about what you want together. Like, I am ABC looking for XY so we can Z.
I like that. That's
what I mean? Like, I've always kind of thought that's an interesting, sort of like way to put things in there. But I mean, I think that, the basics always stand in terms of like, I've never been for like, no hookups. I don't want this. I don't want that. It's like immediately you're on the defensive. The second that you see a bio, you're like, oh, well, this is going to be a pain in the ass. So it's like you just don't. So I think that there's that, again, opportunity to express now more than ever, like a philosophical brand that we hold for ourselves in order to just attract the right people, and really weed out the wrong ones. And I think that this is the time to be, strong in that and steadfast in that, and be like, yeah, I'm unapologetically like this. This is what I'm standing for. And because we're not wasting time. It's not like, let's go on dates with 100 people and see who works out best.
Right.
You know what I mean? We just can't. So that might as well just filter people out from the beginning.
Yeah. That's a good idea.
That's my thought on it.
That's what I try to do. I like that idea for the bio, though, because I feel like so many people get to the point where they have to get to their bio and they just blank out. Like, it's this open space. You can do anything you want with it. I think people get overwhelmed and don't do anything then, or, put something stupid.
No, totally. And there are a lot of blank bios, and I've seen, and I've always said, like, I feel like a blank bio is basically just saying, well, I hope you like me for my looks, because I'm not going to tell you anything about me. So, I mean, and that goes for both men and women. There has, like, what are you even swiping on? What are you even going to comment on? How are you supposed to start a conversation? Unless there is something really descriptive in a photo.
Yep. I agree.
I was
going to say, just also, people need to make sure, the amount of times I just see group photos, and it's a bunch of photos, I'm like, who even is it? Like, you can't, you have to do like, this one looks like they're in 3 of the photos, so maybe it's this person. Yeah. Like, you're supposed to be showcasing yourself, and I feel like people forget that. They're like, okay, I look good in this picture, even if there's 6 other people, hopefully they can figure out it's me.
100%. Yeah, I totally agree. And like, either crop somebody out, or, blur out faces or something, or put like a little arrow, like, hey, this is me, or something like that. And I also think, and I don't know if this is controversial or not, but like, I don't think there should be photos with someone of the opposite sex in your profile. It's like, maybe it's your brother, maybe it's your sister, maybe it's, who knows? We don't know that. And it's like, why would you, that to me just kind of, I don't know. I might get some backlash for that, but it's like, you're kind of, the idea is to sort of picture yourself, I think, with this person, and to kind of muddy it with someone else in that visual space,
Right.
feels like it sort of evades that thought process.
Yeah, because theoretically that could be their ex, and then you're thinking, okay, they clearly are not over that person.
Right.
Maybe I don't want to talk to them.
Yeah. Like, why would that person still be like in their dating profile? Or like, are they swingers? Like, what's going on here? You know what I mean? Which I've seen on there too, and like at least be open about it. Like,
Right.
this is, we're a couple, so.
That should go in your bio. We're just talking about. You have to say what you're looking for. I am XYZ. This is my wife, and we're looking to do this together.
And I've actually seen that before.
Discussion though.
Yeah, that is a whole other discussion. But it falls in line with like being authentic. You know, and that is such an overused word these days. Like, it's, authenticity, but we just need that kind of transparent communication of what it is that we're looking for and who we are. And I hope that quarantine, and I actually had a podcast interview last night, and we had a very similar conversation about like a lot of people have had a really hard time with this because they're alone with someone they might not like to be alone with.
Right.
And that is a big challenge for a lot of people. And that's a whole mental health discussion, and that's a whole kind of identity thing. But that's a real issue, a real challenge. So it's like, also using this time to get clarity around that and who we are and what we really do want is like number one importance in terms of actually finding a healthy relationship, because if we don't have it with ourselves, how can we have it with anybody else?
Yeah, true.
And I mean, and that's something that it takes that reflection, it takes that willingness to be introspective and really look at, like, what emotions am I feeling? Why am I feeling this? I mean, why do I just need to go out and fill my time with something? And that's the thing, people don't really have their escape. They haven't been able to go to the bars, they haven't been able to go to the gym, so they've needed to kind of cope in ways that they weren't really equipped to do. And I think that they can't go out and just hook up with a bunch of people. So there's like, really, we've all been forced to kind of figure it out, And like you said, Jess, like now we're sort of kind of moving back into some semblance of reality. But I mean, if there is, like, there's states like Florida or Texas or Arizona that it's like, or California.
Yeah.
Like, hey, guess what, everybody? Back inside.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a whole other kind of struggle again. That if lessons weren't learned the first time, it's going to be doubly difficult to have to try to kind of move through that again.
Yeah. Hopefully around here we can keep it going in a good direction, because I have friends in LA and they're like, yeah, no, miserable.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I think that, I mean, we've been relatively fortunate here, as bad as it was in the beginning, because, of the measures taken and of people not just going out and kind of doing their thing. But like, that is a struggle now, is that we need to maintain that momentum. And I know we're not talking about COVID, we're talking about dating relationships, but again, it is relevant in the sense of like, oh, things are good, things are open, I'm just going to go date around again like I was doing before. Right. That we now have to consider, what could happen because of that. Mm-hmm. So it's like, it still is kind of maintaining that, let's talk a little bit longer, let's be careful, let's go for like a walk in the park instead of like, it's not like you can go to a movie anyway right now, but anything like that, or a show or something where you're inside. So and I think this is an opportunity for all of us to really stick to those values. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, if we were like, I know people that were super locked down, and then when the protests happened in the riot, like, they were out in the protests, and like, hopefully they were continuing to be safe. But you got to kind of question, like, well, how much did you really believe in the lockdown stuff, or were you just kind of following what you thought you were supposed to do? And then now you're just kind of throwing it caution to the wind and like ruining 3 months of progress that you made, So I think now is really the time to like continue on with the lessons that we have learned and hopefully taught ourselves, and bring it to our next relationship, whereas the next person has hopefully done the same thing. Right.
I think that how people react to all this is such a showcase of what kind of person they are and like what they care about. Because at the beginning of quarantine, I think back in like March, end of March, beginning of April, I had talked to someone on a dating app, and he was like, yeah, we should get together. I'm like, what? This is the height of it. You're not supposed to do anything. Because we can go for a hike or something. But back then, and my mom's a nurse, so I was like, no, I'm sorry. That did not work out. But it just goes, like, the people that really, feel strongly about something, that's just not, it might be a deal breaker if someone else doesn't, which I think is good. Because imagine 10 years from now, you're married and this happens again and your husband doesn't want to lock down with you. That might be tough.
I really think that's like you were talking earlier about questions to ask. I mean, that's like, maybe it's kind of awkward, but yeah, I mean, really, it's important to know like how somebody has chosen to handle this, and even now, I mean, as we kind of like slowly explore what we can and can't do, it's like, are people just kind of totally diving back in, or are they still kind of being, a little cautious? Like, we're still dealing with that. So I completely agree. Like, I think that's super important. And if you really are learning a lot about people, whether it's family members or close friends or just a Facebook friend or something, like you're seeing real sides of people come out where you're like, that person is not what I thought they were. And I think that's happening in relationships too. Like Kim was mentioning earlier, like people are, they're locked down with a significant other. Maybe even if they're married, this still may be the most time they've ever spent together. Yep. Because it's like maybe they still had, jobs, or they traveled, or whatever it might have been. Like, very rarely do you have just two people 24/7 locked in. Obviously that's extreme, but kids.
And kids that are out of school, so now you've got, two parents working from home who that was kind of probably like a good thing that they were going on their own way and the kids were going their way. Now all four are home, and it's I don't have that problem, but it's challenging. Like it's a strain on, this has been a true test of figuring out who we truly are, what we are capable of, and really how you can survive with the people that you're with or without the people that you're with, like your heart can break if you can't see somebody. I feel for people that are just getting into like the love part of their relationship. And now, there's a lot of challenges here. And I'm glad we had this discussion because it's definitely an interesting one to have. No matter what angle you're at, whether you're single, you're coupled, you're looking, you're fluid, you're looking to hook up, you're married, you got kids, it affects love in so many ways. It really has.
Oh yeah.
Well, yeah, it's the centerpiece of everything, really, and like you said, it has changed the dynamic of every person's life to a certain extent. Even if you were essential and you kept working, you couldn't go out to the bar. It's like something in your life got changed for the first time in all of our lifetimes across the entire planet. So of course, the byproduct is the way we interact with each other and have the relationships is also changed. So it is an important discussion, and I'm glad that you guys provided a forum to talk about it. And I think the feedback is going to be really interesting too on how people feel.
Yeah, I liked what you said earlier about people need to kind of get to know themselves before they can jump into something and be with someone. And I feel like this has been such an interesting time where all we have is time with ourselves for the most part, whoever we're living with, and hopefully we've been able to get a little more like down to it. Like, here's what I'm about, but. Obviously, there's the day. I think we all have days where we're like, "Nope, I am not about this. I am like, losing my mind." But the good days, I'm hoping that they, at the end of this week, come out and we're like, "All right, now I kind of know a little more."
Totally, yeah, and it really is about like learning ourselves and figuring out how we cope with different things and going through phases, and it's and I think allowing that to kind of happen and not feeling guilty about something that you feel, or I shouldn't be depressed, or I shouldn't be happy, or I shouldn't be excited, or whatever. It's like, why am I feeling this? And kind of working through that. And that the podcast interview that I had last night was a bunch of guys, and we talked about like, being a man in the time of COVID, in the sense of like, there's this societal weird, resistance to talk about any sort of feelings or mental health as a guy, but it's basically slapped everybody in the face when you're alone with yourself and people are miserable and people are depressed, and either you have to talk about it or you're going to drive yourself mad. So it's like, understanding, our own kind of thought process and emotions, again, is then gives just better perspective to bring into a relationship or a dating standpoint, or even just have a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I could talk about this forever. I don't know how long you guys want to go for, but I mean, it's
I think we could make dating this like whole topic a series.
I was going to say, I think we should do like a follow-up, like a second follow-up one. And, you know, kind of drag it out to part 2 and talk about, you know, like there's a million things I'd love to talk about. Like, what are dates going to look like? I'm so curious about that. Because you're not going to go bowling. You might not go to a restaurant. You might not go to a movie. You're not going to go to a bar. How creative are dates going to get? We could do this all day, but it's Saturday, so we've taken up enough of your time. And if you're down, you two, I say we do a round 2.
Yeah, 100%.
I love it. We can get like, you know, I can bring it in from like the old married lady perspective.
I don't think you count.
But you know what? No, definitely not. But at least you're not like actively dating, so you can see things that sometimes people in the field, so to speak, can't see as well. You know.
Yeah, and as long as we can wife Jess up in 2020.
maybe
that's not gonna be a problem.
I'm just kidding. All right, I love you both dearly. I appreciate your time. I can't wait for round 2 of this. Go enjoy your Saturday. I wish you both a ton of love until we talk again.
Yes, thank you.
Likewise. Thank you guys both. My pleasure. Thanks, guys.